Next, I want to introduce Josh Schaub, as Nick mentioned, is an experienced attorney and a sports veteran. And he's the owner and CEO of the Lyle Baseball Partners, which is an expansion prospect league team in Lyle, Illinois, that's scheduled to debut this year. He's a partner in the Weber Law Group in Minneapolis, and he also serves as an associate scout for the Milwaukee Brewers, as well as an advisor to our group. So, Josh.
Thank you to council, thank you to the neighbors and followers of this development. We appreciate your time in coming here today. Some of you may recognize me. I was before council at the previous session where Mike presented the stadium concept. Much like then, as now, I believe in this concept that it's viable for minor league baseball. Not only is it viable, but it will be a tremendous success going forward. And that's based not only on my own experience, but also looking at the statistical data and comparables, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in my presentation here. So in this first slide, we're going to discuss what we're discussing, minor league baseball, what that entails, some of the other uses that have already been mentioned for the stadium. And then also I'm going to add a little depth into what the youth tournaments really bring. And the stadium component is actually a big part of the youth tournaments and driving those youth tournaments and really expanding the geographic scope of where those teams come from. So I'll start out, and I promise to be brief. This is a topic that I get excited about. I'll do my best to keep it limited. Minor league baseball. What does that equation really look like? There's two components. You have affiliated minor league baseball and you have independent league minor league baseball. Affiliated baseball obviously means teams that are affiliated with major league teams. Major league teams own the contracts of the players that are in affiliated baseball. Independent league baseball are players that were either passed over in the major league drafts, so they are undrafted free agents signed to independent league teams, or they are players that have come from affiliated baseball that were released for some reason, whether it be injury, performance, or most likely a major league team has determined along the way that they are not big leaguers, which doesn't mean they're not professional baseball players. In fact, a lot of them are great professional baseball players. In fact, I think the gentleman behind me about to speak was an undrafted free agent and made it to AAA. So what independent league baseball is in terms of a product and where it came from was in 1993, Major League Baseball capped the number of minor league teams at 160. And in 1993, what that meant is you had a suppressed labor market for baseball players, which spilled out 700 players a year that are still professional baseball players and had the ability to play professionally but needed someplace to play. The other aspect of affiliated baseball you should know about is territorial restrictions. Many people, I think, when we discuss this development, ask, why can't you be affiliated? The reason is, much like many franchises in America, affiliated baseball has territory restrictions. And in this particular market, you have the Milwaukee Brewers right up the road who own this territory. They then have the right to determine whether another affiliated team could come into this market. Going a little further down that rabbit hole, if the Milwaukee Brewers said, we are okay with having an affiliated team here, that means you have to purchase an affiliated team and move it here, since you cannot have expansion because of the cap of 160. The hurdle of that is your only geographic territory in terms of league you're in is the Midwest League, of which no teams are for sale right now. So we then land on the independent league route. And I'll go into a little bit about independent league baseball at this point. Speaking specifically to geographic leagues that we could potentially fit in here, you fall into three: the Atlantic League, the American Association, and the Frontier League. Each of those leagues has a little different level of talent in each, with the Frontier League having A to high A players typically, American Association A-ball to AA, Atlantic League is AA and AAA, primarily located on the East Coast, but somehow ventures down to the South in Texas. Geographically speaking and talent-wise, the American Association fits the 4,000-seat stadium that we are proposing here today. Some people have questioned independent leagues and the talent level, and I can speak briefly on these players and give you some confidence and solace in their abilities. If the argument is players in independent leagues don't make it as often to the big leagues as affiliated teams, that's true. I can't argue that, and the simple reason is big league teams keep funneling those players through their system to the big leagues. However, if the argument is the Midwest League is better than the American Association, I have to say that's patently false. for the reason that independent league players in the American Association have already played in the A-ball system. They've already played in the high A system, the rookie level system, and most likely in the double A system. And they've succeeded at those levels to some level of degree to have moved on. So therefore, the only conclusion is if they were released in their 23, 24, and 25-year-old season, they then have been released by a big league team. They actually haven't even hit their prime yet. So players are actually still improving when they get to the American Association, which is what we are proposing for Franklin and the surrounding communities. So we've discussed league opportunities and where we've landed. American Association is our chosen league. Other tenants, UW Milwaukee, who you're going to hear from briefly, will be the sole Division I state baseball team. They would be housed in this stadium, and a tremendous honor for Franklin to really put a regional stamp that you are the home of the only Division I baseball team. PDL soccer would also be housed here. Premier collegiate players in the country spend their summers on PDL teams. This is a step below MLS and NASL, so it's a form of summer collegiate league sport, but using the most elite college soccer players in the country. Ancillary uses, and this sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of minor league baseball and operations, is these teams all put on other events besides minor league baseball. So within the stadium, you'll see car shows, Easter egg hunts, 5K runs, church gatherings, anything you can imagine, dog sniffing events. I mean, this stadium will have events beyond baseball. It truthfully is a new town hall, a community gathering space beyond just baseball. As I mentioned, Mike talked a little bit about youth tournaments. Just to put in perspective what it means to have 80,000 people going in and out of the exits of this stadium and that complex, and then just run you through a day of a family. And we're going to touch on a little bit the demand for this, but families show up. They may be staying in a hotel in Franklin or in another municipality, show up to the stadium at 8:30 to play their game for 2 hours. From 10:30 to 12:30, they go out to get lunch. They go out to get lunch somewhere in your community. 12:30 to 2:30, they play another game. Then they go out again and they go shopping. They come back. From 4:30 to 6, they play another game. Then they go back out to dinner. And they go out in your community. Following that, they go back to their hotel, have recreation. And this happens weekend after weekend after weekend, feeding businesses surrounding these facilities. And this is proven throughout the country. So, as mentioned, in 2016 alone, there's 80,000 visitors planning to enter and exit through that youth tournament, whether it be for games, practices, and whatnot, throughout days next summer. Now I'm going to speak a little about stadium stability, franchise stability, talk a little about comparables that are in the marketplace and what gives confidence that this is going to be a very successful venture here in Franklin. At the outset, I will say that in Mary Claire's travels, she pointed out an economic study to me regarding an economic analysis doubting the economic impact of minor league stadiums, and I want to touch on that briefly. First, that study, I thought, lacked some credibility in parts. One part being that it quoted independent league baseball is only staying in certain areas for an average of 4 years at a time. The problem with that is the author used a study from 1980 to 2006. Independent minor league baseball in its common form only started in 1993. Even further down the road, and looking specifically at the leagues we're discussing, the Atlantic League, American Association, Frontier League, the average tenure of those teams at this point is 13 years. So even though that author may have studied leagues that had fallen by the wayside, we're not discussing the league. We're discussing the 3 major independent leagues that are currently in the market. And I'm glad I heard earlier that the city will be looking into data analysis regarding this project. I have a book of data analysis of independent leagues, specifically these teams. If teams even do fail, it's likely due to operators, which Mike has proven to be a great operator. When operators do fail, the stadium does not fail. Oftentimes, leagues move back into that stadium. So keep in mind as you read through analysis, there's a lot more to it than what may meet the eye, and I invite you to dig deeper in the analysis as this process moves forward. Even further regarding franchise stability, 33% of independent league teams actually exist in markets such as these, those being large MSAs with major league teams. And I want to point out 2 specific ones because I think they draw some parallels. The St. Paul Saints just opened their stadium this year and finished, averaging 8,500 fans a game. They're only 10 miles away from Target Field and Minnesota Twins. Kansas City T-Bones, right across The borderline of the World Series champ Kansas City Royals. Kansas City T-Bones have been around for approximately 10 to, I believe it's just over 10 years, and are continuing to successfully draw fans to their games despite being in this large MSA. And those comparisons go on and on and on and on. Population comparables you can find in your statistical analysis. Incomes for Franklin fit right in the sweet spot for minor league baseball. Competition-wise, I know there may be some angst regarding the Milwaukee Brewers being in the marketplace. My only comment regarding that is, truthfully, these are different products. When you come to these games, the price point is completely different. We're talking an average of family of four for $75 versus going to the Milwaukee Brewers, which is in excess of $240 on average according to Major League Baseball. So keep that in mind as we push forward about who our competition is. Typically, our fans come a 15-mile drive radius to our stadium, so any competition or people who cite competition that are Beloit, Appleton, Kenosha, Madison, truthfully, that is not our competition. Our competition, movie theaters, Chuck E. Cheese, anything within our geographical area of that 15-mile footprint. I'm just going to try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. We talked about the economics. You're going to find studies that vary across the board because each stadium is different. The surrounding development is different. I invite you to really study this one wholeheartedly with considering the development surrounding it. And as I wrote up there, even any economic study you find will say that it's either positive or neutral. I find it hard to believe you'll find one that's negative. I also encourage you to call other municipalities with minor league stadiums to ask that government entity their experience with the stadium. The other aspect of stadium impacts is social utility and quality of life. The one thing, and none of those economic measures can put a dollar sign on, is the quality of life. Kiplinger reports that minor league baseball brings a quality of life to municipalities, which retains jobs, it creates jobs, and creates future homeowners within those municipalities who see themselves living in an area that provides safe, affordable family entertainment for everyone. Lastly, the comparables I want to finish with penultimately before I show you a visual. St. Paul Saints, as I mentioned, finished their first full season. Just some documents and articles that discuss that have all been positive and rave reviews about what it's done for the surrounding businesses or the quality of life. Kokomo Jackrabbits, something that MKE Sports and Mike are intimately familiar with, had tremendous success in their first year, and I want to take some time to read an article in the Kokomo Perspective, a brief article about the impact. First off, the article was regarding the most influential people in Kokomo, of which Jax, the mascot, was listed as a representative entity of baseball in that community. Jax, the Kokomo Jackrabbits mascot, embodied the excitement and progress taking place in the city in 2015. Tough, playful, and lovable, Big White Rabbit represents improved quality of life while inviting residents to enjoy an evening at the ballgame. The Jackrabbits may have been the best thing to hit Kokomo in years. Residents responded with enthusiasm in the new stadium and the team, filling seats so frequently that the stadium ranked 26th in the nation in attendance for summer collegiate leagues, or teams and leagues. And the attractive stadium received its own accolades, being named the best ballpark in America in its class in its first year of operation. The Jackrabbits, with Jax as their mascot, also reached out to the community, holding special nights for a number of local charities, during which a portion of ticket sales were devoted to the organization and greater awareness was achieved for the programs. And Jax was sure to make a few special appearances at public events to keep the baseball fever climbing. While some were skeptical that baseball would provide much of an incentive for tourism or even community involvement, the amazing response proved the critics wrong. Jax and the Kokomo Jackrabbits represent everything that is good and growing in Kokomo and provide a level of goodwill to the community that hasn't been seen in these parts in decades. I invite you to replace Kokomo with Franklin in that paragraph and see yourselves in that position. So I'm going to wrap up finally with some visuals regarding what you see throughout America in terms of neighbors interacting with stadiums to know that we are not in a unique position. In fact, this happens in a lot of municipalities. You can go see these overheads. They're all out on the internet, but you can see this is River City in the Frontier League, the amount of residents that encompass this stadium, and they coexist on a day-to-day basis. This has been done before. We can do it here in Schaumburg, Illinois, just down across the border. That's a $40 million stadium with very large homes residing right outside the outfield fence. So with that, I apologize for the length of my conversation. As I mentioned, there's a lot more data that goes into this. We've studied it, the leagues have studied it, and they've vetted it, and I'm going to turn it back over and yield my time. Thank you.